The desert night, tracer rounds tore across the sky. An American squad was pinned inside an abandoned village, walls crumbling under relentless fire. They were outnumbered. Their medic was bleeding. Their comms were dead. And in the corner sat the one person no one trusted, Ellis Monroe. She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't supposed to matter. But as rotor blades thundered overhead, the helicopter didn't land for Sergeant Grant Mercer's men. It landed for her. Before we dive into this story, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Welcome to Grateful Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. The first shots came without warning. Dust ripped through broken windows as bullets shredded the walls of an abandoned village. Sergeant Grant Mercer threw himself against cover, barking orders while the desert shook with enemy fire. Mercer was 39, broad-shouldered, a survivor of 3 brutal tours in Iraq. His voice carried the weight of experience, honed by years of leading men through chaos. For his squad, he was both anchor and shield. The team was 6 strong, each man chosen for a reason. Lieutenant Kane Foster, the sniper, calm and precise, whose scope rarely missed. Corporal Brian Colton, demolition specialist, restless and sharp, with explosives packed neatly at his side. Specialist Jared Miles, combat medic, hands steady under pressure even as bullets cracked around him. Technician Leo Garner, the wizard of communications, carrying more antennae and signal boxes than rifles. And 2 rangers, old hands at security, disciplined and silent, covering front and rear. Together they had earned their reputation lean, battle-hardened, confident in each other's skills. Yet even among men who trusted only what they could see, one figure stood out awkwardly at the edge. She was the outsider. Her name was Ellis Monroe, 32, straight posture, plain standard issue uniform, no custom patches, no scars of combat. She carried only a tablet pressed against her chest, moving as if trying not to take up space. The orders from Washington had dropped her on their laps 3 weeks earlier. Analyst, the paperwork said. An observer sent to evaluate operational data. To Mercer, it felt like someone had assigned a librarian to a battlefield. He made his feelings clear the first night. Sit in the corner. Don't get in the way, he told her flatly. His men snickered, and she said nothing. She only opened her tablet, fingers moving quickly over encrypted maps. But behind her silence, or her eyes missed nothing. She studied body language, angles of fire, distances between landmarks. She didn't laugh with the others, didn't complain about rations, didn't share stories. She simply watched. The mission briefing came under the canvas roof of the command tent. Maps littered the table, markers drawn across terrain near the border. High Command wanted surveillance on a walled compound deep in the foothills, rumored to house something more than ordinary insurgents. Mercer tapped the map with a gloved finger. We insert from the west, ridgeline here. Low movement between Oro 200 and 400. Observation posts in place. Gather intel and pull out before sunrise. Simple. Ellis raised her voice for the first time. Sir, thermal scans show that ridge is patrolled every half hour. The eastern slope is thinner, less heat signatures. Her tone was even, not challenging, but factual. Mercer stared at her like she'd grown horns. Analysts don't run ops. You sit. We act. He turned back to his squad. They smirked, enjoying the moment. Colton muttered, brought a desk jockey to a knife fight. Ellis lowered her eyes, tapping notes into her tablet without reply. The meeting went on, decisions made without her input. When the squad dispersed to check gear, she stayed behind, scanning the satellite feed again in silence. Later, under the desert night, she sat alone by the barracks. The tablet glowed blue against her face as she pinched and zoomed across grainy imagery. Her attention locked on one building at the northern edge of the compound. The antenna array was wrong-angled differently, pulsing at frequencies no village outpost should carry. Footsteps crunched beside her. Leo Garner, communications tech, Offered a steaming cup. Coffee, he said. Black. Like your clearance probably isn't. She allowed herself a small smile. Took it. Don't mind Mercer, Garner muttered, staring at the stars. He lost men last year because intel was garbage. Trust is thin. Ellis answered quietly. I'm not here to make friends, just to do my job. Garner shrugged and left her in peace. A vibration on her tablet drew her eyes. A secure message flashed across the screen. She typed a long code with muscle memory, erased the trail, and locked the device. Her face changed for a heartbeat harder, sharper before returning to the calm mask of an analyst. She leaned back against the wall, eyes scanning the base. From where she sat, she had a perfect line of sight to every critical area to the motor pool, the guard posts, the tent with Mercer's maps. Nothing about her posture suggested accident. Hours later, darkness cloaked the desert. The squad moved in silence, boots crunching on loose gravel. Mercer led, Foster close behind. Weapons angled and ready. Ellis kept pace in the middle, her stride more confident than expected, her breathing controlled. Through narrow gullies and over jagged rock, they advanced toward the compound. The night was brittle, every sound amplified. Coyotes howled somewhere distant. The wind pushed sand across their path in ghostly sheets. Mercer checked his watch, raised a fist. They settled at the observation point overlooking the compound. Through night vision lenses, they saw movement far too much. Guards rotated in precise intervals. Lights flared on rooftops. The quiet target looked alive with activity. Something's off, Mercer muttered. Then, almost on cue, floodlights snapped to life, bathing the valley in harsh white. Shouts rang out in a foreign tongue. Armed men poured from buildings, rifles raised. The squad ducked for cover, gunfire erupting from multiple angles. The desert exploded into chaos. Mercer swore as tracer rounds sliced overhead. They had walked straight into a trap. Gunfire echoed through the valley. Not the wild bursts of local militias, but the measured rhythm of trained fighters. Their volleys came in coordinated waves, forcing Mercer's squad to shift cover like pieces on a chessboard. The enemy moved with precision. Their shouts clipped, their formations disciplined. Mercer felt it instantly. This wasn't a ragtag ambush. The rifles carried night optics. The comms chatter bounced across encrypted frequencies. Someone had prepared this strike with military-level planning. Back to the structures, Mercer yelled. His voice cut through the noise, sending the squad moving in practice bounds. They sprinted toward a row of abandoned mud brick houses, walls collapsing but still offering shadows to fight from. Inside, the air smelled of dust and decay. Cracked beams jutted across the ceiling, already shuddering from impact as bullets slammed into the walls. Miles stumbled in last, blood soaking his thigh, his face pale under night vision glow. Get him down, Foster shouted, dragging the medic against the wall. Colton leaned in to check, only to hiss as a fragment tore across his arm. Another man down, another layer of pressure pressing against them. Garner dropped his gear on a half-broken table, flipping switches with frantic speed. Static crackled through his headset, a screech of interference. Signals blocked, he growled. Not random noise. This is patterned. I can't punch through. Mercer's jaw tightened. No comms meant no backup, no rescue, no warning. The team was an island under siege. He turned to see Ellis kneeling against the far wall, tablet already active, her fingers moving like a codebreaker at work. Her calmness seemed unnatural in the chaos. While bullets shattered glass and chipped concrete, she scrolled through streams of frequency data. The numbers made sense only to her. Her eyes tracked signals bouncing through the walls. A sudden flicker caught her attention. She shifted toward a cracked corner, brushed away layers of dust, and found a metal box bolted deep into the stone, a transmitter camouflaged and humming faintly. She glanced once toward Mercer. He was too busy coordinating fire arcs to notice. With precise movements, she loosened the casing, slipped out a glowing core chip, and slid it into her boot pocket. The hum died instantly. Monroe Mercer's bark snapped across the room. He stormed over, shoving a med kit into her hands. "Stop messing with toys. Put pressure on Miles's wound. That's the only thing you're good for here." She caught the kit, her face expressionless. Without a word, she moved to Miles. He groaned, sweat dripping down his forehead. She unwrapped the bandage with clean efficiency, pressing gauze firmly against the torn flesh. While she worked, her other hand slid casually along his vest. Documents stuffed in a side pocket caught her eye scribbled notes, a snapshot of their earlier recon. She angled her tablet discreetly, snapped an image, then tucked the papers back before anyone noticed. Gunfire raked the side of the house. Dust rained from the ceiling. Foster and the Rangers returned fire with short, disciplined bursts, each shot carefully chosen, but their magazines emptied too quickly. The sound of bolts slamming forward on empty chambers, far too frequent. The enemy pressed closer. Footsteps pounded against the dirt outside, shifting in unison. Grenades clinked against walls, their blasts sending showers of clay and wood. The squad ducked low, ears ringing, lungs filled with grit. Mercer pulled himself up, scanning the perimeter. "Ammo check," he barked. The responses were grim, each man counting single digits. One last magazine if lucky. Their margin for survival thinned by the second. Ellis raised her head from Miles's side, her voice cutting through the chaos. "They're calling reinforcements from the north. Trucks are en route. 25 minutes until full encirclement." Mercer's head snapped toward her. What his tone was sharp, accusatory, like she'd spoken treason. How the hell do you know that her eyes were steady, unblinking? "I'm listening to their frequencies. They rotate code every 6 minutes. I cracked it. They'll collapse on us in under half an hour." The room went silent for a beat, only the crack of rifles outside filling the void. Colton muttered under his breath, a curse that didn't hide his fear. Foster's eyes narrowed, realizing she might be their only advantage. Mercer didn't want to admit it. The thought of trusting a desk analyst grated his instincts raw. But the rhythm of the enemy's fire, the way they moved her words fit the pattern he was already sensing. Another explosion shook the house, ripping away part of the rear wall. The squad scattered, choking on smoke. Shouts in a foreign tongue rang louder, closer, promising the net was tightening. Garner yanked at his equipment, sweat streaking his face. Still nothing. Every band's jammed. It's like they knew exactly what gear I'd bring. His voice cracked with desperation, something rare for the calm tech. Ellis pressed gauze into Miles's hand. "Hold this steady," she ordered quietly. Then she stood, brushing dirt from her sleeves, tablet glowing in her grip. Her eyes flicked to her watch, the faint blue digits counting down. No one noticed the timer but her. 5 minutes. 4. Each second ticking like a heartbeat she couldn't reveal. The squad thought she was working frequencies. In truth, she was waiting for something far larger than any of them. Outside, the footsteps grew louder, boots striking in unison. A shouted command rose above the gunfire, followed by the metallic slam of heavy weapons being positioned. The siege was about to crest into annihilation. Mercer reloaded with deliberate calm, though his hands trembled behind the steel of his rifle. "Last stand, boys," he muttered. His men nodded, resigned to the fight. Even Foster, cold sniper's eyes, carried a flicker of doubt. Ellis remained apart, gaze fixed on the sky through the shattered beams. Her breathing slowed, her posture straightened slightly, though she kept the mask of detachment. The countdown glowed on her screen. 3 minutes. 2. 1. Bullets punched through the front wall, forcing everyone flat to the ground. Splinters cut across the skin, Miles groaning as debris showered his wound. The enemy pressed harder, a relentless machine closing its jaws. Mercer crawled to Ellis, fury blazing. "What are you doing just standing there?" he snapped. "Get back down, damn it!" But she didn't move. She tapped once on the tablet, deleting something only she could see. Her face revealed nothing, yet her body was coiled, ready. She whispered under her breath, words lost in the roar of battle. Then the faintest vibration shivered through the ground. No one else noticed. Ellis did. Her eyes flicked upward, where the desert night hid the sound of approaching rotors still miles away. The squad braced for the next wave of fire. None of them realized something else was coming. Only Ellis knew the clock had nearly reached zero. The roar came first, a low vibration that shook loose sand from the ceiling beams. Mercer's squad froze, heads snapping upward as rotor blades thundered through the night. Relief surged in their chests. Extraction had arrived. But then confusion. The helicopter wasn't descending toward the designated landing zone. Instead, it banked hard and dropped straight into the courtyard behind their battered stronghold, right where Ellis had positioned herself. Doors slammed open on impact. 4 figures in matte black gear spilled out, their movements crisp, practiced, no insignia, no patches, no names. One raised a hand, gesturing directly at her. "Commander, this way." For a heartbeat, Mercer's mind went blank. "Commander." His men exchanged stunned looks, disbelief flooding their faces. The woman they'd mocked, the analyst they'd shoved aside, stood slowly to her full height. Ellis no longer hunched, no longer timid. She reached down, pulled a compact beacon from her boot, and flashed a sequence of coded lights. A language older than radio, precise and unmistakable. The bearded operator nearest her snapped a nod. In one fluid motion, he tossed her a Veston rifle. She caught both cleanly, strapping the armor with speed that spoke of long practice. A streak of fire cut across the sky, an RPG launched from the alley. Ellis pivoted, shouldered the rifle, and squeezed the trigger once. The warhead detonated midair, a bloom of flame lighting the courtyard. Inside the house, Mercer's squad went silent, jaws slack, rifles half lowered. They watched the analyst move like a veteran operator. Every illusion of weakness collapsed in that flash of fire. "Ghost Division," the bearded man muttered, eyes locked on her. "Glad to have you back. Commander Monroe." The name struck like thunder. Ellis Monroe, Commander, not analyst. Mercer's breath caught as the pieces fell into place. The mission was never about reconnaissance. It was about her. Gunfire surged again, enemies reacting to the sudden arrival. The helicopter's side gunners raked the alleys, cutting down advancing fighters. Dust stormed around them as Ellis turned, voice sharp. "Pairs, move to the bird." "I'll cover her." Command carried weight that Mercer had never heard from her before. His men reacted almost instinctively, pushing toward the courtyard under suppressing fire. Foster hauled Miles. Colton staggered behind, clutching his bleeding arm. Ellis moved like shadow in steel, firing in controlled bursts. Her rounds weren't frantic, they were calculated. Every shot forcing enemies back. The ghost operators mirrored her rhythm, forming a wall of lethal precision. A ranger went down halfway across the courtyard, pinned by automatic fire. Without hesitation, Ellis sprinted from cover. Mercer cursed, certain she was running to her death. Instead, she slid across the dirt, hooked an arm under the soldier's vest, and dragged him bodily toward the chopper. Rounds cracked inches from her head. She didn't flinch. Her movements were mechanical, efficient. The muscle memory of countless missions no one in Mercer's squad had ever been cleared to know about. The ranger collapsed into the helicopter. Ellis shoved him inside, then spun back toward the fight. The operator nearest her called out, 30 seconds. "Commander, we're maxing exposure." She nodded once. "Plenty." Then she advanced again, clearing angles with flawless coordination beside the ghost. Mercer fired alongside them, almost against his will, drawn into their rhythm. For the first time, he wasn't the one leading. Finally, the last of his men scrambled aboard. Colton slumped against the wall, pale but alive. Foster dropped into a seat, still gripping his sniper rifle as if refusing to let go. Ellis vaulted in last, pulling the door shut with a heavy clang. The helicopter lifted immediately, nose angling away from the inferno of tracers below. Wind howled through the open gun ports as the desert dropped away beneath them. Inside the cabin, medics tended to Miles and Colton. The ghost operators checked gear, eyes never fully leaving Ellis. Mercer sat rigid, helmet in his lap, staring at her like she was a stranger, and she was. She removed her headset, met his gaze without hesitation. Commander Ellis Monroe, Naval Intelligence, Ghost Division. Your mission was a cover for my infiltration. Garner blinked hard. Ghost Division. That's not even. He cut himself off, realizing it was pointless. The truth was in front of him. Mercer's voice cracked, rough from disbelief. So the act, the clumsy analyst routine, all of it. Ellis's expression didn't shift. If you suspected me, if anyone did, the mission would collapse. The safest way to hide was to let you dismiss me. And you did. Silence pressed heavy in the cabin. The men avoided her eyes, replaying every sneer, every dismissive word they'd thrown her way. None of it had touched her. She'd used it. Below, the desert burned with muzzle flashes. Above, the Blackhawk thundered toward open sky. Relief barely had time to settle before alarms screamed in the cockpit. Missile lock, the pilot shouted. Sam's inbound. The cabin lurched as flares burst from the sides, streaking fire across the night. But the lock held. Another warning tone shrieked. Closer this time. Mercer's heart pounded. He reached instinctively for the wounded, bracing for impact. Then Ellis pushed past him, sliding into the comm station, bolted to the wall. Her fingers flew over encrypted panels. Watchtower. This is Keynote. Authentication, Sierra Alpha. 9 Delta. Initiate Lazarus countermeasures. Her voice was steady, iron hard. Lights on the console blinked to life. Code sequences streamed across the display, too fast for Mercer to follow. Ellis input strings like she'd memorized them years ago. Her focus absolute. Out the window, the missile streaked closer. 30 seconds. 20. Every man aboard gripped his seat, eyes fixed on the inevitable. Ellis hit the final command. The helicopter spat another burst of flares, this time paired with a high-pitched pulse, invisible to the eye but lethal to guidance systems. The missile veered violently, trailing into darkness before erupting harmlessly in the sky. The cabin erupted in shouts of relief. Mercer let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Colton laughed weakly despite the blood on his arm. Ellis leaned back from the console, expression unchanged. We're clear. Adjust course 30 degrees west. Primary zone is compromised. For the first time, Mercer truly saw her not as an intruder, not as baggage, but as the one person keeping them all alive. And in that instant, he realized the woman he had ordered to stay out of the way was the only reason any of them still breathed. Floodlights washed the runway in white. The Blackhawk dropped onto a strip that wasn't on any map. Engine whining as rotors wound down. Armed MPs waved the squad toward separate doors without ceremony. Medics pulled Miles and Colton onto stretchers, working with quiet speed. The ghost operators vanished through a gated corridor, boots echoing once and then gone. Ellis stepped to the tarmac, already composed, already 10 steps ahead. Mercer barely had time to stand before 2 security officers approached. Sergeant Mercer, this way. His rifle was taken, magazines counted, pockets emptied. The others were split off one by one and led into windowless rooms. The debrief space was all corners and glare. One chair, one metal table, one recorder that clicked when it started and clicked when it stopped. The questions were clinical and narrow movements, timestamps, who said what gear was visible. They asked about the analyst. They never used her rank. Describe her behavior, the officer said, face blank. Mercer kept his answers precise, keeping anger out of his voice by forcing every sentence to be short. Hours stacked like bricks. Water arrived, then more forms. Somewhere down the hall, a door thumped shut, then another. The base felt built from silence and concrete. When Mercer was finally walked down a new corridor, He passed a desk where a clerk slid a file into a red folder. The top page was visible for half a second. Analyst Ellis Monroe separated during extract. Presumed missing. He stopped a fraction too long. The guard tapped his elbow to keep him moving. Words that didn't match reality scraped against bone. Missing meant erased. Missing meant the truth would live only in mouths that couldn't speak. Back in a dim hangar, the squad assembled without their weapons. Foster stared at the floor. Garner flexed his hands like he'd forgotten how to be still. The Rangers said nothing. The habit of quiet now await. The hangar door split with a hydraulic sigh. Ellis stepped through. Not in battle gear, not in a lab coat, but in dark service blues with minimal marks. She moved like the room belonged to her, and it did. She approached without guard or entourage. In her hand, a small black case. She set it on a crate between them and opened it to reveal 5 silver discs. No words, no crest, only a phoenix in shallow relief, wings rising from flame. These never appear on a wall, she said. Voice even. They never leave your lockers. If anyone asks, they don't exist, but you were there. Operation Orpheus, one by one. She pressed the discs into their palms. Foster rolled the coin once and closed his fist around it like a vow. Garner swallowed hard and slipped his into a hidden pocket. Ellis turned to Mercer last. Your skepticism gave me perfect cover, she said. I needed someone who would never assume the best. Mercer held her gaze, the coin cold against his skin. I was wrong about you. The words were simple and heavy. They landed and stayed. You were right about the world, she answered. Keep asking hard questions. Don't change that. People who can't be fooled are the last line. A transport ramp clanged somewhere behind her, time pulling her away again. She lifted the case, closed it, and slid it under her arm. Officially, the analyst didn't make it. She added, that keeps you cleaner than you know. What about the thing we found? Garner asked. Voice small for the first time. The network. The plan. It's being cut apart, she said. You helped put the blade in my hand. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. The truth was enough. She stepped back, then paused. You'll receive new orders. Routine work. Nothing that points here. Her eyes moved once across each face. You did well. Then she was gone through the crack in the hangar door, into a corridor that swallowed sound. For a long moment, no one spoke. The squad just listened to the base breathe. That night, in a barracks that smelled of oil and dust, Mercer lay awake and turned the coin in the dark. The phoenix caught the faint light like a heartbeat. No inscription, no date, only the idea of a fire that remakes what it touches. 3 months slid by, training ranges, motor pool checks, a quiet deployment that ended as quietly as it began. One morning, a plain envelope sat on Mercer's bunk, no stamp, no return address. Inside, a single line typed on weightless paper, Orpheus prevented 4 coordinated attacks, 2389 lives saved. He read it twice, memorized the number, and walked it to the burn barrel behind the barracks. The paper curled, blackened, and lifted as a red edge ate the words. He watched the smoke drift and pictured faces he would never see. A nurse locking her bike, a boy tugging his mother's sleeve, a train pulling in on time. He didn't tell the squad. He didn't have to. The next day, they trained like the number was a weight shared between ribs. No speech, no plaque, only effort. Seasons turned, orders changed. A year later, Mercer's team was sent to a coastal airfield for a low-profile escort, 1 small jet, 1 passenger with a diplomatic cover story. No insignia on the cases, no chatter on the net. They ran the perimeter with extra eyes, set outer and inner rings, and never once asked who the passenger was. Respect became muscle memory. Curiosity became discipline. The handoff was clean. As Mercer signed the last line on a logistics clipboard, he felt the presence behind him before he heard the steps. He turned and found Ellis waiting at the edge of the runway, wind pulling a strand of hair against her cheek. No thunder this time, No rotors, just the sound of waves beyond the fence and a jet warming to leave. Mercer straightened, boot heels square, and brought his hand up in a salute that had nothing to do with etiquette and everything to do with truth. She returned it with exactness, then lowered her hand and allowed the edges of her eyes to soften. "I'll remember to use your real name in the real report," she said. He almost smiled. "I'll remember to ask worst-case questions first," he answered. "Seems to keep us breathing." She tilted her head toward his men. "You kept them alive when it mattered. That's the only ledger anyone reads in our line." A crew chief waved from the stairs. "Time to go." Again. Ellis offered a small envelope sealed. Heavy, unmarked. "If you get a call using the word Orpheus again, answer it," she said. "It means the music tried to start back up." "Understood." Mercer slid the envelope into his vest without looking. He didn't need to. The trust was already banked. She stepped backward toward the jet stairs. "Take care of your people," she added. "And your doubts?" Then she turned, climbed, and vanished into the cabin's bright rectangle of light. The door sealed. The aircraft rolled, lifted, and drew a thin line into the sky. Mercer watched until it was a speck, then nothing. The airfield felt ordinary again. Forklifts, radios, the scuff of boots on concrete. Back with his squad. He said nothing about envelopes or reports. He only checked positions, adjusted spacing, and reset the perimeter the way he wished he'd done one night in a village built from clay. The men moved with him, unasked. Later, when quiet finally came, he took out the silver phoenix and placed it on his palm. The metal was still cold, the wings still rising. He thought of how a machine works, how one small pin can lock a gear, how one unseen spring can release all of it. He had once looked at a person and seen a burden. Now he understood the danger of easy judgments. The most ordinary face at the table might be the keystone that keeps the whole structure from falling. He closed his hand around the coin and slipped it into his chest pocket. Then he stood, found his team, and moved them forward, eyes open. Questions ready, never again mistaking quiet for weakness.